The serpent in the book of Genesis is one of the most iconic symbols in religious history. Many people associate it with evil, temptation, and the fall of humanity. But what if I told you there's more to this story than meets the eye? Today, we're going to dive deep into the hidden meanings behind the serpent in Genesis and explore how this symbol may have layers of significance beyond the traditional interpretation. But before we jump into this fascinating topic, if you're new here or love exploring the deeper meanings behind ancient texts and symbols, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of my future videos. Now let's get started. Let's start with the interpretation that most of us are familiar with. In the traditional Christian perspective, the serpent is seen as Satan, the embodiment of evil, who tempts Eve into eating the forbidden fruit. This act leads to the fall of man, original sin, and the expulsion from the Garden of Eden. The serpent in this context represents temptation. It's the creature that lures humanity away from God's command, sparking a rebellion against divine authority. The consequences are catastrophic, not just for Adam and Eve, but for all of humanity. From this angle, the serpent is a clear antagonist in the story. But is that the full story? To truly understand the serpent's role in Genesis, we need to zoom out and look at how serpents were viewed in other ancient cultures around the time Genesis was written. In many ancient Near Eastern cultures, the serpent was actually seen as a symbol of wisdom, fertility, healing, and even immortality. For example, in Egyptian mythology, the serpent god Wadjet was a protector of kings. In Greek mythology, Asclepius, the god of healing, is associated with a serpent entwined around a staff, a symbol still used in medicine today. So could the serpent in Genesis have a more complex meaning? It's possible that this creature, which brought knowledge and awareness to Adam and Eve, could symbolize not just temptation, but a form of enlightenment. Think about it. The tree from which Adam and Eve eat is called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. After they eat the fruit, their eyes are opened. They gain knowledge. They become aware of their own nakedness, of morality, of choice. This knowledge, however, comes with consequences. They lose their innocence, and they are cast out of Eden. It's a classic story of growing up. When you're a child, the world is simple. You follow the rules laid out by your parents without fully understanding them. But as you grow older, you begin to question, to make your own decisions, to define right and wrong for yourself. In many ways, Adam and Eve's story mirrors that process of maturation. Could the serpent then be a representation of that pivotal moment when humanity steps into moral awareness and free will? Instead of seeing the serpent as purely evil, maybe it represents a necessary agent of change, something that transforms Adam and Eve from innocent beings into morally responsible adults. It's also interesting to note that the serpent in Genesis is not directly identified as Satan in the text itself. That connection was made later in Christian theology. In the Genesis narrative, the serpent is described as being more crafty than any other creature. But is craftiness inherently bad? In many cultures, the serpent is seen as a symbol that contains both good and bad qualities, wisdom and deception, life and death. It's an ambiguous figure, much like the knowledge of good and evil itself. The ability to discern between good and evil can be used for great things, but it can also lead to suffering and hardship, depending on how it's applied. The serpent could therefore represent the ambiguity of knowledge, the dual nature of moral freedom. It's not just about temptation, but about the complex consequences of gaining awareness. Let's take a moment to think about the role of free will in this story. One of the most important aspects of being human is the ability to make choices. Adam and Eve had the choice to obey or disobey God. By choosing to eat the fruit, they exercised their free will, but in doing so, they also accepted the consequences of that choice. In many ways, the story of the serpent is not just about temptation. It's about the human condition. We are constantly faced with choices, and those choices shape our lives and our destinies. The serpent's role could be interpreted as introducing the concept of free will into the narrative, allowing Adam and Eve to break away from blind obedience and choose their own path, for better or worse. Many scholars have pointed out that the serpent in Genesis reflects a broader theme of duality in the Bible. On one hand, it represents temptation and sin, But on the other hand, it also represents knowledge and transformation. This duality is central to many of the stories in the Bible, where figures and symbols are rarely purely good or purely evil. Even the act of eating from the tree can be seen as a moment of both loss and gain. Adam and Eve lose their innocence, but they gain knowledge. They are expelled from paradise, but they begin the journey of humanity in the wider world, a world where they can make their own decisions and build their own lives. In later interpretations of the Bible, especially in Christian thought, the serpent becomes synonymous with Satan. But in Jewish tradition, there are other interpretations. Some rabbinical scholars have viewed the serpent more as a symbol of human nature, our desires, our curiosity, and our capacity for both good and evil. This broader view allows for a more nuanced understanding of the Genesis story. The serpent is not just an enemy. It's a symbol of the complexity of life itself. It reminds us that the line between good and evil is not always clear-cut, and that our actions often have consequences we cannot foresee. So what is the hidden meaning behind the serpent in Genesis? Is it a symbol of temptation? Or does it represent something deeper, like the gift of knowledge and the burden of choice? Perhaps it's a little bit of both. What's clear is that this ancient story still speaks to us today because it touches on universal themes: innocence, knowledge, morality, and the complexity of human nature. It's a story about growing up, about making difficult choices, and about facing the consequences of those choices. Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think the serpent represents? Is it purely a symbol of evil, or is there more to the story? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this exploration of the serpent in Genesis, make sure to hit the like button and share this video with others who might find it interesting. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you can join me on future journeys into the hidden meanings of ancient texts. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.